I pressed my palm against the pine's rough bark and breathed in the sharp scent of resin. 3 hours from the city, and already I felt the weight lifting from my shoulders. "This is perfect," Marcus said, dropping our gear beside the river. The water gurgled over smooth stones, and somewhere above us a hawk circled. I watched him stake out our campsite with methodical precision. The same way he approached everything, measured, controlled, predictable. That's why I'd been surprised when he suggested this trip. "We need to get away," he'd said over breakfast last Tuesday. "Just us, no distractions." The fire caught on my third match. I fed it twigs, then larger branches, building it into something that could last. Marcus arranged our sleeping bags inside the tent with military corners. "Coffee," I offered, filling our camp kettle from the river. He nodded, settling on a fallen log. "When's the last time we did something like this?" I couldn't remember. Our marriage had become a series of routines: work, dinner, sleep, repeat. Even our conversations followed scripts. "Too long," I said. The afternoon dissolved into simple tasks. We gathered deadwood, filtered water, shared a can of soup over the growing flames. I found myself watching Marcus more carefully than I had in months. The way his hands moved when he worked, the line of concentration between his eyebrows. "I'm going to walk for a bit," he said as dusk painted the sky purple. "Need to clear my head." I stirred the embers with a stick. "How long?" "Hour, maybe 2. He kissed my forehead, a gesture that felt both familiar and distant. "Stay warm." The forest swallowed him whole. I sat alone beside the crackling wood, surrounded by a silence so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. Their voices reached me before I saw them. Low, easy conversation filtering through the trees. I looked up from my book to see 2 figures emerging from the shadows. "Evening," the taller one called. He had sun-weathered skin and carried himself with the confidence of someone who belonged in wild places. "Sorry to disturb you." His companion was darker, quieter, with intelligent eyes that took in our campsite with a single glance. Both wore those heavy canvas packs that serious hikers carry. "No disturbance," I said, closing my book. "Just enjoying the peace." "Mind if we set up nearby for the night?" The tall one gestured toward a flat spot 20 yards downstream. "Been hiking since dawn, and this is the first decent water we've found." I should have said no. Should have mentioned Marcus would be back soon. Instead, I found myself nodding. Of course. They moved with practiced efficiency, their tent rising in minutes. The quiet one, Rowan, he introduced himself, produced a camp stove and tea kettle. The other, Soren, gathered stones to build their own ring. "Tea?" Rowan offered, holding up a small tin. I accepted the steaming cup gratefully. The blend was rich, smoky, nothing like the generic bags Marcus and I usually brought camping. "You're out here alone?" Soren asked, settling on the ground beside my log. "My husband's taking a walk. He'll be back." But as the minutes stretched into an hour, I found myself relaxing into their company. They told stories of mountain trails and hidden valleys, of nights spent under star-drunk skies. Their laughter was genuine, infectious. Soren's shoulder brushed mine when he leaned forward to poke the fire. Rowan moved closer, close enough that I could smell pine soap on his skin. "Beautiful night," Rowan murmured. I looked up at the canopy of stars, suddenly aware of how isolated we were, how far from any rules that might matter. Soren's hand found my shoulder first, warm, steady, asking a question I hadn't expected. I looked into his eyes and saw no pressure, only possibility. "We don't have to," Rowan said softly. "But if you want." I thought of Marcus, somewhere in the dark forest. I thought of our careful, predictable life, of conversations that never surprised me anymore. "I want," I whispered. What happened next belongs to the firelight and the watching stars. Gentle hands whispered encouragement, the soft scratch of pine needles against my back. They were patient, attentive, nothing like the hurried encounters that had become my marriage's norm. I lost myself in sensation, the heat of the fire against my skin, the cool night air, the weight of bodies moving in ancient rhythm. For the first time in years, I felt fully alive. Later, we lay tangled together on their spread sleeping bag, my head on Soren's chest, while Rowan traced lazy patterns on my arm. The fire had burned down to glowing coals. "Your husband," Rowan said quietly. I lifted my head. A figure stood at the edge of the firelight. Marcus, perfectly still, watching us. My heart hammered against my ribs. I waited for him to shout, to demand explanations, to storm away. Instead, he stepped closer. Our eyes met across the dying fire. I saw no anger there, no betrayal. Something else entirely. Curiosity, perhaps, or recognition. "Don't stop," he said simply. Soren's arms tightened around me. Rowan's hand stilled on my skin. "Marcus, don't stop," he repeated, settling onto the log where I'd been sitting hours earlier. "I want to see." The shelter of their small dome had become our world, intimate and separate from everything beyond its thin walls. But I knew he was out there, listening, learning something about the woman he'd married. I woke before dawn, still wrapped in unfamiliar arms. Through the tent's mesh window, I could see Marcus feeding fresh logs to the flames he'd kept alive all night. Carefully, I extracted myself from the tangle of sleeping bags and slipped outside. The morning air bit at my bare skin, and I pulled on yesterday's clothes with trembling fingers. Marcus looked up when I approached the fire. His face was unreadable. "Coffee?" he asked, as if nothing had changed. I nodded, settling beside him on our log. We sat in silence while the water heated, watching smoke rise into the lightening sky. "They're good men," he said finally. I studied his profile. "Are you angry?" "No." He poured steaming water over instant granules, handed me the cup. "Are you ashamed?" I considered the question honestly. "No." "Good." Behind us, I heard quiet movement as Soren and Rowan broke camp. They worked efficiently, erasing their presence with the skill of people who understood the wilderness code. Leave no trace. Soren approached our fire, fully dressed, his pack shouldered. "Thank you," he said simply, "for the hospitality." Rowan nodded to both of us. "Safe travels." They disappeared into the forest as quietly as they'd arrived, leaving only footprints in the soft earth and the memory of gentle hands. Marcus and I sat alone beside the crackling wood, the same fire that had witnessed everything, now burning with new purpose. The silence between us felt different, not empty, but full of unspoken understanding. "Why?" I asked. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Because I wanted to see you differently, and I did." The morning stretched between us like a bridge neither of us knew how to cross. I watched Marcus methodically clean our camp cookware, the same precise movements he'd use at home. "How long have you been thinking about this?" I asked. He paused, a tin cup halfway to the river. "Months, maybe longer." "About me with other men?" "About us. About what we'd become. He knelt by the water's edge, scrubbing with more force than necessary. We were disappearing, Haley, both of us. I thought about our life in the city, the careful distance we maintained even in bed, the polite conversations over dinner, the way we'd stopped really seeing each other. So you brought me here to test something. I brought you here to find something. He returned to the fire, water dripping from his hands. I didn't know what would happen. I hoped. Hoped what? That you'd surprise me, that you'd surprise yourself. I pulled my knees to my chest, watching him pack with the same methodical care he brought to everything. But something had shifted in his movements, a looseness I hadn't seen in years. Those men weren't random, were they? He stopped packing. I saw them at the trailhead yesterday, heard them talking about camping by the river. I took the long way back to give you time alone with them. The admission hung between us like smoke from our dying fire. I should have felt manipulated, used. Instead, I felt something closer to gratitude. You orchestrated it. I created the opportunity. You made the choice. I had made the choice, freely, without coercion, following desire I hadn't even known I possessed. The memory sent heat through my body that had nothing to do with the morning sun. Do you regret it? Marcus asked. No. The word came without hesitation. Do you? No. We finished breaking camp in companionable silence, but the weight of unspoken questions pressed down on us like the heavy packs we shouldered for the hike out. The drive home passed in contemplative quiet. I watched familiar landmarks appear through the windshield, the gas station where we always stopped, the bridge over Millfield Creek, the billboard advertising the county fair. What happens now? I asked as we pulled into our driveway. Marcus turned off the engine but didn't move to get out. Our house looked smaller somehow, more confining than I remembered. I don't know. Inside, everything was exactly as we'd left it. Mail stacked on the kitchen counter, coffee mugs in the sink, the life we'd been living before the forest changed us. But the space felt different now, charged with new possibility. I unpacked our gear while Marcus sorted through 3 days of mail, domestic routine, but with an undercurrent of electricity that hadn't been there before. Haley, his voice was careful. I need you to know what happened out there. It wasn't about inadequacy, mine or yours. I looked up from the sleeping bags I was spreading to air dry. What was it about? Discovery? Permission? Watching you become fully yourself. And what if I want that again? The question surprised us both. I hadn't planned to ask it, but now that the words hung between us, I realized how much I meant them. Marcus set down the mail. Then we'll figure it out. Together. Even if it means changing everything. Everything was already changing. We just weren't acknowledging it. He was right. Our marriage had been slowly suffocating under the weight of routine and assumption. What happened in the wilderness had torn away the careful facade we'd built, revealed something raw and honest underneath. There'll be rules, he said, boundaries we agree on. And if we can't agree, then we'll learn to disagree better than we have been. I folded the last of our camping clothes, considering the shape of this new territory we'd entered. It would require navigation skills we'd never needed before, honesty, courage, the willingness to risk everything for the chance at something real. The tent needs to be stored properly, I said finally. Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him in months. I'll take care of it. But as he headed for the garage, I knew we were both thinking about more than camping equipment. We were thinking about the careful structures we'd built around our marriage and how we might dismantle them to build something stronger, stranger, more honest. The price of transformation, I was learning, was the life you used to live. But looking at Marcus, really seeing him for the first time in years, I thought it might be worth paying. I watched him disappear into the garage, listening to the familiar sounds of boxes being moved, equipment being sorted. But something felt different now, like I was hearing these sounds for the first time, or remembering what they used to mean when we were younger and everything felt possible. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "How did it go with Marcus? Did you tell him about the job?" I stared at the screen. The job. In all the strange intimacy of the morning, I'd forgotten about the offer in Portland, the decision I'd been avoiding for weeks, the opportunity that had felt like an escape route from a marriage I'd thought was slowly suffocating. "Found the sleeping bags," Marcus called from the garage. "They're in better shape than I expected." I walked out to find him holding up 2 faded blue bags, the ones we'd bought for our honeymoon camping trip to Yosemite. He was smiling, but there was something tentative in his expression, as if he wasn't sure whether these particular artifacts were safe to reference. "Remember how cold it got that first night?" I said. "We had to zip them together. And you complained about my feet for 3 days straight. They were like ice blocks. I thought I might lose a toe to frostbite." We stood there in the dusty garage, surrounded by the accumulated debris of our shared life. Christmas decorations, old furniture, boxes labeled in my careful handwriting from moves we'd made together. The weight of all those years pressed against my chest. "Marcus," I said, and my voice came out smaller than I'd intended. "There's something I need to tell you." He set down the sleeping bags and looked at me directly. "About Portland?" My breath caught. "You know, I've known for weeks. Sarah mentioned it to Dave at the barbecue." He stepped closer. "I've been waiting for you to decide if our marriage was worth fighting for, or if you'd already made up your mind to leave."